All right, let's see if my screen will share well. That's what happens when you reboot your machine before you start. Everything goes psycho on you. If I can find my screen. There we go. That's better. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Your screen will play well with others.
Yes, we can see it. Looks good.
Yeah. I try to play well with others, but sometimes that doesn't work. All right. So tonight's going to be very not presentation PowerPoint stuff. I really am not an awesome PowerPointer. But this one doesn't lend a whole lot to PowerPoint. I mean, PowerPoint's really nice in this case, or in other cases, but in this case, what we're going to basically do is we're going to try to get the environment set up for tomorrow. There are a lot of things that are not necessarily in the realm of a beginner. Those of you who've been using PowerShell for a while know that sometimes because we advance in technology, a lot of the documentation or a lot of the things out there are kind of old. For example, my SQL Server Central stairway on PowerShell, I'm trying to get it rewritten to be modern because while everything I talk about in the stairway, in the 12 stairway steps, is valid, it is old. I mean, it's 2008 R2, 2012, and so it's a little bit dated. And so sometimes the things that happen today are so much more beyond that that we need a little refresher to get some of the more advanced topics dealt with. So if we get everything set up tonight, tomorrow and the next day will be a lot more doing things. This is more getting things set up, understanding the nuances of using the commands. I don't know that I'd consider it beginner, only because I'm not going to really be going really slow or saying, oh, this is how you do this or that's how you do that. I'm going to be introducing things that are going to need to be done for you to get into a more advanced environment. So hopefully this will be helpful, and it will be very script. We're just going to do a lot of script, and there will be a lot of typing, even though you're not supposed to type in demos. I'm totally good with typing in demos, sometimes typing badly in demos, but it'll be fun anyway. So the first part of this is really about the power tools. So when we talk about power tools for SQL and PowerShell, there are a lot of power tools in Windows for PowerShell, and I'll introduce you to a few of them that will really be helpful when you start to use them for managing higher end things like clusters or availability groups. Doing the main DBA stuff, there's a core set that most people already know about, but sometimes run into issues. And the way this will work is I'm going to explain when we set these things up, why we're doing the things we're doing so that we can understand. But basically on the screen, you'll see there's some core modules that we will use tomorrow and Wednesday that will be key to getting the most out of this PowerShell experience. Now, I'm not going to be talking in the next 3 days or 2 days and tonight about the basic commands. I'm going to try to take you through a deeper level of everyone knows how to restore a database. And to some degree, there's probably a lot of you who understand how to restore a database with DBA tools or with SQL Server or something like that. But there's a lot of other ways to use these tools that you might not know about. And that's what I'm going to try to dive into in the advanced side of this play. So let's get the environment set up first, and then understand why it works this way so that you can do more. There's nothing more frustrating than believing that it will work, following somebody who knows how to make it work, and then finding out it doesn't work. It starts to get a little bit dicey when you want to just fire up your window. I have a PowerShell window. I'm going to fire it up, and I just want to get crap done. And unfortunately, it tends to get away from people. And whenever I teach my classes and I do pre-cons, the first thing that happens is someone comes up during a break and says, hey, I'm getting this error and I don't know what to do. And had it not been for that time where they could come and say, hey, how do we get it to work, and we get them past it, they may have abandoned PowerShell using as a DBA, because DBAs don't typically go and program in PowerShell or understand what the crud SMO is. I mean, what is that? And so we're going to take you through the whole gamut today, and it's going to kind of be fire hose, but I hope by the end, and that's why questions are going to be important for you if you don't understand it, to get the principles of what you need to know before we get into tomorrow and Wednesday, because when we do that, we are going to be actually using these exact tools to get you to where automation is a piece of cake. Running an agent job is a piece of cake. So those are things that we're trying to get. And there's a few other tools that we will, let me add one more in here because I absolutely love this one. It's really simple, but it's a simple module, but it's a super cool tool. All right, so let's start. We know about DBA tools. DBA tools is a very prevalent place. It's got a really prevalent place in our ecosystem as a DBA, and the reality is it's really, really powerful in a lot of things we do, only because we as a community have written or changed things and contributed, right? So it's not just somebody sat down in a black box and said, I want to do things, and they wrote all the commands. Now, it started out with Christy Lemaire, and she had a task to do, a migration task, and that's how it started. She built it for migrations, and it has morphed. There's over, we'll check it out here. So get module or get command. Measure object, if you can spell. We're going to do this with each module just to show you what breadth it has. But right now, the version that is on this machine, 590 commands. Now, some of those may be aliases, but 590 commands. This tool is a staple. So when you think about all the things you're going to be doing, just think about the staple nature of this tool. And we'll be going over lots of commands. And I mean, lots is, if you go over 10 in a night, that's a lot if you've never used them. And that's what we're going to try to do for the next couple nights is this. So DBA tools, staple. It's in your toolbox. You're good to go. I hope that everyone has had a chance, or most of you have had a chance to go over DBA checks. DBA with a beard, or Rob Sewell created this baby, and it is super cool. We're running it on one of my instances to show you what it does. We won't be doing that tonight. We're going to get it set up because that module has a little trick. And if you don't get past the trick, then you don't get it installed and you don't get to use it. But we'll get you past that. The SQL, the Posh RS job. I don't know how many of you had a chance to use that, but this is one of the power tools. So Posh RS job was written by Bo Prox, and it is out on all of these are out on the PowerShell gallery, except for, I don't know if these are on the PowerShell gallery, but I have a reference to where they are, so you can go get them if you've never used them. But Posh RS job basically is an extension to if you've ever used PowerShell jobs. So if you ever ran a command and said -as job, and it does this background thing and runs in the background, so you don't see it in the foreground. It gave you back your prompt. That's a handy thing. In the job system, in PowerShell, it uses another PowerShell.exe. So it actually spawns another PowerShell instance. And that can be pretty heavy if you have 10 jobs. It'll spawn 10 windows of PowerShell under the covers, and it will be full-blown PowerShell instances. And sometimes that can be pretty heavy, especially if you start to want to parallelize a lot of things. Posh RS job is really about the RS in this guy, and that is about run spaces. And we will take you through in the next couple days run spaces. If you've never played with them, it's going to blow your mind. It's not quite as bad as Inception if you've ever watched that movie, but it does get pretty deep, or can get pretty deep, and you kind of have to get an idea of how to use it. But run spaces is basically a lightweight thread instead of a full-blown PowerShell window. It still has its own environment. You can load modules, you can do all the things, but it runs on a thread and is asynchronous, just like a job is. And it uses the same principles as far as receive job and start job and all that stuff, but you're going to start an RS job. So run spaces are going to be your friend when you start getting the hang of it. In fact, you might even be tempted to overuse them. And you'll find out where you hit your limit. I once did a load test. This lasted a while. And the load test, I did 25 threads per window. So I fired up like 10 windows, and I ran in each window 25 threads to insert, update, delete, run procs, all that stuff. And I ran the CPU right up the chain. But they all ran simultaneously. And so all the 25 threads are doing this work simultaneously with their batches of work, all separate batches. But I just loaded it up with threads. But it was super cool to parallelize the workload and to watch what happened. So great little tool. But BoProcs just basically gave you a little tool that has a module interface that you can just start RS job, and it will run space for you. I will show you how the run spaces work if you wanted to do them yourself. I just don't know why you would, unless you wrote your own function to do what you wanted to do the way you wanted to. But all of the things in RS job have throttles, and we'll show you those commands tonight. The next one is SQL Server. This is a Microsoft one. The one caveat I'll say with this, and you'll get all these documentation things, V5 is required. SQL Server is written by Microsoft, and it's compiled, so it's not a script type module. It's a compiled module, so it has a DLL, and it's all compiled, so it's all .NET stuff. But it does require version 5, so it's not as flexible if you have a lower version of PowerShell. Most of these modules, I think, require 3 is what I understand. We can look and see, but their version 3 is required. And so you kind of get a little bit of flexibility in how you run these tools. But SQL Server module is a super awesome module. You're going to see in depth in the next couple days why you care. They have commands to restore a database, just like DBA tools, has a command to do some availability group stuff, just like DBA tools. So they're sister modules, because there are some things that are really, really hard to do in script, and Microsoft did them for us. So we leverage that module. But the one thing that sets the SQL Server module apart is the provider. You will not duplicate the provider. The provider that Microsoft gives you in the SQL Server provider in SQL Server module is unparalleled in how you operate with SQL. And when we get done with tomorrow and Wednesday, you will understand when you use each and why you'd use the SQL Server module over the DBA tools in some cases, and maybe even mix them. And then we're going to show you a few places where you can mix them and get really good value. So V5 required, which is nice because that's where you get install-module as well, which we'll show you. Import Excel. Doug Fink created this beauty and keeps on updating it very nicely. And basically, this gives you the ability to export data into an Excel spreadsheet and workbook. An Excel spreadsheet, I call them spreadsheets because they're XLSX files or workbooks in their language. And you can actually create a workbook with multiple sheets with this import Excel without even having Excel in the premises anywhere near you. This will just work. It'll export an Excel thing, whether it's a sheet, workbook, or whatever, You can create pivot tables. You can do all sorts of things. So we're going to go take you through that in the next 2 days because that is a power tool that might save your butt when people go, yeah, I want this data, and you have it in a CSV or you have it in a query and you want to stuff it out into an Excel spreadsheet and fire it off to somebody. No need to copy paste, no need to pull up out grid view, no need to do all these things to get where you want to go. So import Excel, super cool. And like I said, he keeps on updating it. So there's more functions, more things you can do. Super, super cool. The pending reboot one, I added that one just because pending reboot, I think, has one function. And we're going to show you that function. But basically, pending reboot is the name of the module. And the function is called test-pending reboot. And one of the hardest, the best things ever for me is I do a lot of clustering, Windows failover clusters, and even availability groups. And when you have to install multiple instances on a cluster to do add nodes in across your cluster, these pending reboots pop up. Sometimes you can get away with it, and you don't have to worry about pending reboots popping up because you did them in the right order, and maybe you just got lucky. But the reality is that those who install tools like Management Studio on your SQL servers tend to have a fun time with, should I reboot? Or do I have to reboot? Because when you're installing clusters, you cannot do an add node on a node that is requiring a reboot. In fact, you can't even install an update or SQL Server on any machine, regardless of clusters or not. You can't install SQL when there's a pending reboot. It will come up in your process if you do it via the GUI. And if you don't do it via the GUI, the caveat, if you do it a silent mode, is that it won't tell you if you say, don't tell me the progress, and just do a silent install. If there is a pending reboot, it will not throw an error so you know it's an error. It'll come back to the prompt and you'll go, well, that seemed a little fast. You have to dumpster dive into the logs to find out that, yeah, there was a pending reboot. So you have to reboot the machine before you can install. So I like to take control of those environments, and pending reboot is a fantastic little piece. It's just fantastic. The next two, I'm going to add one other one too, just to talk about it here, because we're talking about advanced. So I want to make sure we have the right tools for advanced flavors. I'm not talking beginner stuff, so we get to buckle up and put on our big boy pants. Export PS credential and import PS credential are really just scripts. Now, where you can get them, there is a GitHub for Rambling Cookie Monster. And in his PowerShell folder or PowerShell project on GitHub, it has these two scripts. And the import PS credential, and you'll see them in my folder here, export PS credential and import PS credential. These guys are how you do automations with alternative credentials in running your commands under a different guise. So if you ever have a need to run get DBA disk space in DBA tools under a different credential, it's even if it's a Windows credential, it will be able to use this principle. If you use SQL credentials, and some people do, some people have to, because they have elevated permissions on their admin accounts and they have a normal credential that doesn't have access to it, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And that will cause some other interesting things. But the reality for us is that we will eventually need something that will require some kind of credential that we don't want to type or have in the script in plain text. Because you could do it. You can create a PS credential and force the password to be a secure string, and the string is right there in plain text, and it will force it to be a secure string. But that is a terrible way to automate, because now auditors hate you, and ISO and SOC, they hate you, and so you just don't do that. So these two scripts have been out there forever, and the benefit to them, when we get into them, we'll talk about the benefits there, but the biggest benefit is it's encrypted for that machine and for you. For whoever created or exported that PS credential, it is encrypted for that machine only and for your user account only. If you copy that baby off onto another machine, it will not import. You will not get that credential. It is using DPAPI under the covers, and it is scoped to that particular machine and you as the user. So it's pretty slick, but it does take a little bit of setup, but I'll tell you, it is really easy, and we'll go into that advanced thing when we use it tomorrow. You'll see what I mean. Then PS Framework, most of you probably might not have even heard of this, but there's a very smart guy named Friedrich. Well, he's German, so it might be Friedrich. I think it's Friedrich Weinmann, and he is a guy who works for Microsoft, and he is a master coder in C# and stuff. And part of what he does is help DBA tools with some objects, and he compiled them into a DLL. So we get to take advantage of them there because they're .NET, and PowerShell loves .NET. So he gave us the ability in DBA tools to actually have strongly typed objects that weren't in SMO, but were able to be leveraged like SMO. But he also created this PS Framework module. If you haven't played with it or went out and seen what's in it, we'll show you what's in it tonight. We won't use it until the next 2 days. But this PS Framework module is all coded. It's all C# and compiled just like the SQL Server module. And it has some pretty dang good logging and lots of other things to create modules and use templates. And we'll dive in deep in the advanced phrase tomorrow and Wednesday. But great module. All of these modules, minus the scripts, because the scripts are right here. You'll just get the scripts and they're right here. They're just functions in scripts. Export PS credential and import PS credential are just scripts. But these modules here, we're going to show you how to get them on your machine, and also how things work when they're on your machine and you want to update them and stuff like that. But super great power tools. We'll take a pause for questions. Any questions so far? Hopefully I've been clear. Awesome. So let's go on. All right. So the commands that we will see here tonight are update module, install module, and remove or uninstall module. And the install module is only available in version 5 and above. So that is a ism. That is a PowerShell ism that is good in PowerShell 5 and above. In PowerShell 4, and we're going to show you the cool stuff. This is kind of more advanced, but it's a way to get them even if you only have PowerShell 4 and PowerShell 3. This works really great. There's one thing that the PowerShell gallery did for you. Then that is that each module is self-standing. It is what we call encapsulated in and of itself. So what that means to me, and this is what I'm going to teach you, is that in the realm of I want my modules and I can't affect my environment to be version 5.0 of PowerShell or 5.1, you get to still have your modules. Super cool. They're all self-standing, so you're all good. But the first thing we do is we look to do install module. Hopefully you've all got 5.0 or 5.1, I mean, and each version of Windows 10 as they upgrade and you get new, 20 half-twos or 1909 or 1904, those will still have a flavor of 5.1. It'll be revved, but not, don't think that you're going to get this awesome thing going. But right now we're going to be focused on V5. There is new versions, version 6, which really I wouldn't use. I would use version 7. So 7 has a 7.1, and 7.1, most of these things I'm going to show you tonight will work. They are not particularly scoped just to Windows. So as you know, or it may not know, version 7 of PowerShell, which I'll be showing a little bit probably on Wednesday on Linux. PowerShell 6 and 7 actually were built on the .NET Framework core. And the version 6 used was 2.0, and it wasn't terrible, but it did limit a lot of functionality that you're used to in Windows, and you don't get it in 6. So 6 was nice. It wasn't nice enough. PowerShell version 7 came out, and PowerShell version 7 has .NET 3.1 core and has, I think the last time I heard, like a 90+% synergy with Windows commands that you're used to in Windows actually run on Linux. So if you ever need a common programming or platform, you can get it with PowerShell 7 on Linux. Not all commands in DBA tools will run in PowerShell 7. Most of them that won't even show up to be available to you. If you import module DBA tools in PowerShell 7, it'll just eliminate or omit those that don't actually work, that don't have the right command or the right classes in .NET Core. So you won't get those commands. But most of them, the REPL doesn't work and stuff, but most of the commands you use every day, they're SMO. And SMO can run on Core. It's super darn cool. So first command, install module. And really, this is all you'll really do. It has a default parameter of name. So if we were to back up here and say dash name, I think it's just a default parameter, but I thought there was a parameter called name. But apparently, according to my IntelliSense, that is not true. So install module DBA tools, and there's really nothing else. You can add flags down here, and we'll show you a couple of them. You can point to a different repository. You can say, I want the maximum version is this. So if you have an automation that used a version and DBA tools is now later than that, you don't want to chance this because you've developed your stuff with this version of DBA tools. You can just grab the maximum version or the minimum version or the required version, and it will let you pull that one down from the PowerShell gallery. They're all versioned there. So you can pull down the required version of 1.0.111 and down it will come. You can change the scope. So you can do the scope into a user scope, or you can change it to the machine scope and get it put where you want. We'll show you that in a second. But again, not really necessarily a advanced feature. So I'm not going to go too deep in this, except for a couple of these things because we're going to need them. But right now, that's you can just do install module with the name. You don't even have to put any extra stuff, and I'll show you where you have to. But what that will do is it will start installing DBA tools. Now, here's what happens when people have already done it. It'll start to connect to the PowerShell gallery, and I'm going to show you. See if DBA tools 111 is already installed. If you want to install it, you can use the force. So you can be a Jedi for a day, right? And use the force to get your module there. The best way to do that would be to update module DBA tools. And it does the same thing, technically. It will put a new version. So we'll go and show you the version of where it stuffs it. Bear with me because I have 3 screens here. Where it puts it is a few different places. One, program files, Windows PowerShell. If you're using anything modern, PowerShell modules, and then here's your modules. And if I look at DBA tools, sure enough, they'll have a lot of versions. So this machine has done it even before 1, and then 1.021, and then all the way up to 1.1.114. So it just puts it there anyway. If I do update DBA tools, it will just put the new version in another folder. And whenever you say import module DBA tools, it says it grabs the latest one, unless you say required version or minimum version or maximum version. It will do what you say. If you say I want the maximum version to be 112, it'll pull 111 because 114 is above that and there is no 112. It'll do the one next to it. So again, import module will let you play. But I could whack all these if I wanted. I just delete them. They're self-standing, so they don't rely on anything in any other folder. But I can clean them up if I want to. If I don't want to, I don't have to. The other place it puts it, if you want to do it in your scope. So if I say click there and I click on documents, there is a native folder called, in your documents folder, Windows PowerShell modules. Now, I don't have any here because I don't install them here. I install them in the global place. If you don't specify scope on the install, it will just put it in the machine scope, which is the program files, Windows PowerShell. It's not the x86 one unless you're in an x86 window. It will install it in the x86 one. But typically, you're in the C, Windows program files, and Windows PowerShell, and that's where you're going to find all your modules. Okay. If you said install-script, the modules are up there. There is some scripts up in the PowerShell gallery. So if we look at the PowerShell gallery here, you will see there's plenty of stuff, and there are scripts in here. See, scripts. If you say install-script, then you'll get them in the scripts folder. And I don't have a lot of them. I installed a script called the Azure Public Load Balancer Upgrade, and it stuffed it inside the scripts. So that's kind of nice, but that's where it puts it if it's a script instead of a module. So be aware of that. All right, so let's go back. And then update module does the same thing. If it finds a module, what if it doesn't find a module? Then it'll tell you, I'm sorry, you can't update it because it doesn't exist. So if you didn't have it on your machine and you try to do an update, then it will die. And then uninstall module basically removes that module from your machine because you don't want it anymore, whatever. So one thing I didn't address, and I will show you how easy it is to find. I believe I have this in my profile, and we're going to talk about profiles in a minute, but I'm just going to show you what. Okay, so maybe I don't have a profile on this machine because it just told me I didn't. So I will show you where to get that guy. Just bear with me for a minute. I go out. Usually I have it in my profile. In this particular machine, I don't have it, but I can get it. So it is PowerShell TLS 1.2. And inevitably, you'll get this Pobby guy, and it's just a one-liner. But you'll see, I can't make it do it because I guess I could make it do it if I said TLS 1.1. So let me go out and get, but this is the error message you get. You'll say invoke web request. No, you won't say invoke web request. You'll say in install-module, and it will come up and say, I couldn't because I have this bad place. I can't create the TLS thing. And what is wrong with that is that the install-module is required by PowerShell Gallery. So PowerShell Gallery now exclusively uses 1.2 TLS. So on Windows 2016, unless you've battened down the hatches and made Windows 2016 use TLS 1.2, by default, you will get an error message when you say install-module. And again, that's what I was telling you about tripping people up. You end up with, hey, it should work. The command was install-module. It came back and told me an error. And that's a yucky thing. So in here, if I right-clicked on this guy, I don't like to do the little multi-lines, but I know why he did it. But notice it says TLS 1.2. So I'll show you the error message. I'm going to say TLS 1.1. And I'm going to say install-module pending reboot. I don't think I have it on this machine, but if I do, unable to resolve package is the error. My PowerShell Gallery API v2, I can't do that, and it says install package or no match was found for the specified criteria because it has no idea because it can't even find it because you were using TLS 1.1 as your default. So now I go in here and I say TLS 1.2 and I say install module and okay, it hates me still. Pending reboot. Did I spell it wrong? Pending reboot. This is not good to see, but I'm not sure why it didn't let me do it because I set my security protocol to be TLS 1.2. So let me try it again. Let me try another window. Whoa, it's over on my other window. and see if it actually comes back to me. Install dash module pending reboot. By default, my machine is set to do TLS 1.2. So it's going to take a minute to go out and look through, and it didn't come back and say anything because I have something set on here that I'm going to tell you in a second. I was hoping to have it show me like, hey, do you want to install this? Yes or no. But because I've already set my machine up, because I hate the prompts, I'll show you what we're going to do. But anyway, it worked. It went connected, and the other window said I couldn't do it. I mean, the other window said, nah, not going to happen. So unfortunately, the protocol really does matter. So if you ever have a problem, you can set this TLS 1.2 in your profile, which we'll show you in a second. All right, so there's a way around it. This is the command that we're going to talk about, set repository. So by default, you have a get-ps repository. And this get-ps repository is going to basically show you, and I think I spelled it right. Yep, so it should be good. I'm going to go into a different window because I don't like that guy. F8 get PS repository, and it's going to come up and say PS gallery, and yours by default will be untrusted. And here's my location. Does that look familiar? API-/v2. That looks kind of familiar, like this guy. Here's my API v2. So that's how it communicates with the PowerShell gallery from PowerShell. So that right there is where my location is. I have set it to trusted so that when I did an install pending reboot, it just installed it because I said, I trust you. I don't get any prompts. It just installs it so I can do fairly quickly without anybody having to interact with the command. So get PS repository will show you what it is. In set PS repository, you can tell it the name, which is the name right here, PS gallery, and you can tell it the installation policy is trusted. And from then on, you do have to do this in an elevated prompt. So if you don't have permissions to do admin on that box, you're not going to be able to set it that way, unfortunately. But you can get around that if you want to by doing your install to a local, your scope to your current user instead of the machine. So set PS repository is going to be your friend. And we've already done that, so we see trusted. So we're set up for tomorrow. We're good. This is the module that is one of the modules, and the other one is this one. So we'll do. I don't think I have that check, and I'll show you how to check too. DBA checks. These two modules are probably your problem, children. These will be your challenge when you go to set up in your environment to use these guys. And the reason here in the SQL Server module is because if I were to go down here in my window and said get-module list available and said SQL star, you will see that there are multiple. Here's my PowerShell modules, and here's my versions of SQL Server module. There's my SQL Server X event module, my SQL Server DSC, and my SQL Server Updates module. But then you'll see these guys, SQL PS. And those of you who are familiar with the back day of our world will notice that SQL PS is installed whenever you install SQL Server. So these are here because SQL Server is installed. And I'll show you that I have SQL Server installed. I have instance 1, instance 2. I have Veeam SQL. I have the SQL Server default instance. And whenever I install one instance, I get SQL PS by default. So we're going to show you how to get rid of it to be not part of your world, or you can manipulate it in your profile to not have these be possible. PowerShell is very friendly. It auto loads modules whenever you use a command that is in that module that started in version 3. Version 2, it would just say, I can't find your command, and you're done. You had to load the module or import the module, and then you could get the command. So this SQL PS guy is only installed when SQL Server is installed. It's no longer installed when Management Studio 18 and above is installed. So you won't see it if you only have tools. But the reason it's installed with SQL is because SQL Server still has a dependency on it when you have a job step of PowerShell. They couldn't divorce it from SQL Server agent. So this gets installed by default, and you just get to be happy about it. And you might even smile or give it a nod, but these exist, and this is, notice how version 1, and it's in 13.0. That's 2016, and it's called 1.0. But in SQL 14.0, they decided to let it be a version 14.0. So you get away from this 1.0, which doesn't really help you if you were looking for versions. You'd have to look at the path. But in this case, it's 14 and then version 15. I don't have a SQL 2019 installed on this machine, but it would be 1.50 tools, PowerShell modules, and it would be SQL PS. So these are all fun, but I'll show you how to know where they are and how your behavior is going to be if you just start loading commands without doing this import module. The command is called, and I'll just put this in here for you, get module list available, SQL star, so that you can get it. But there is a environment variable called, and this is a path we'll talk about in a minute, env ps module path. So those of you veterans, you know exactly what this is. And it's basically a big, long set of paths. Now, it looks ugly. We're going to just split by a semicolon, and we're going to see them in a little bit better light. Think of this as a path statement. It's a PS module path, and they go in order. So it will look in my local folder first. So I win. I'm the winner. It'll do that first. So this is my profile in my documents, Windows PowerShell modules. And then it will look in the program files, Windows PowerShell modules. And that, I'll just tell you, it is not guaranteed that this is the order. It just so happens that this is the order in my machine. When you get on Windows 2012, Windows 2012 R2, Windows 2016, Windows 2019, these may be shuffled around based on the PowerShell team's desire to let them be where they are, in the order they are. It used to be that when you installed SQL Server, that this 14.0 would jump to the bottom and this 13.0 would be above it, depending on which order you installed SQL. So imagine if you ran a command that was in the SQL PS module and the SQL Server module, it would look in the 14.0, it would look in the latest version, or it would look in the last version you installed first, and then it would find it and it would load it. So 1.30, if you installed that after you installed SQL 2017, then Windows 2016 version of SQL PS would be installed. So this is an advanced feature that you can manipulate if you wish in your profile. If you set your environment variable called PS module path and you set it to a value of the paths that you wanted it to look in the order you wanted it to look in, it would overwrite the one that is in your system set. If you want to change this permanently, you have to go into your PC properties, and again, let me bring this over to my window. And you would have to go into, no, that's not it. I want to go into my, they changed. See, this has changed. This is a new version of the 20H2, and it didn't do what I said. It's supposed to take me into my advanced system settings, but apparently it doesn't. So I'm going to have to go, where did it go? Remote desktop, advanced system settings. So they just changed it and placed it somewhere else, which is really mean to me. In my opinion, it's mean, and they shouldn't do that to me, but they did it anyway. So you end up with this window. And in this window, you see the computer name and you see the hardware and the advanced, and here's your environment variables down here in the bottom. So you click on here and you see they aren't in the user variables. They're in the system variables down here. And there's one called PS module path. And they are ordered in there. And I can click edit. And here's my things. I can move them up. I can go, I want this one to go up, or I can move this one. I don't ever want it to do these. I want it to do the main ones. Now notice what one's missing. The one that's missing is your personal one, but it auto sets it. So that's why I said, if you want a personal, you don't want personal, then you have to manipulate it when you launch your profile, and that will be shown. But PowerShell modules come first, the modules come second, then Intel, then blah, blah, blah. If I wanted to eliminate 13.0 and just said, don't ever load for me my module out of 13.0, then I could just remove it, delete, and it would be gone. And if I didn't ever want Veeam to load theirs either, I could just do delete, 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 delete. And now I'm cleaning up my place. There's Google Clouds SDK that has that, and they have modules. I can delete that. But what I can do here, not only delete, but I can add my own. So say I had a folder. Say I had a folder here on C, and I just called it modules. And I put them all in here. Then I could put modules in my list here. And it would look in a different place other than Windows PowerShell modules or the PS Home. So I get luxury in this PS module path to customize my environment. And this will be one thing that I'll just say you may or may not want to do it, but it's one of those power tools that lets you manipulate your environment the way you want it to be done. And this is permanent. When you click OK here, which I won't, if you click OK here, it sets it and all the other ones are gone. And so every time you launch PowerShell, this is loaded by default and you just get it. It's for free. But if you want to manipulate it differently, you can click cancel here and not set it. And then you can edit it in your profile and move your things around or do them in your order and eliminate things for your automations. It's a beautiful thing. So profiles become pretty powerful, but environment variables become huge in manipulating your environment. So that's one of the keys, is to know how to make this what you want. Okay. All right. This can be done. You can install multiple modules at a time. So that's kind of nice. This allow clobber. Let's go over this one, these two modules. So SQL Server, you notice I had plenty of SQL Server when I said list available with SQL Star. We do have SQL Server with its lots of flavors. I think they just released a new one. So if I said update module, it would update my modules and I'd have a new one. But one of the things that happens in this install SQL Server is that SQL PS has commands that are the same as the SQL Server module. And so PowerShell is a great nanny or grandmother that says, you're not allowed to do that or I'll slap your hands. And so this guy says install module SQL Server. And if I didn't do this allow clobber, it would come back with me and say, I'm sorry, I see SQL PS on here. There's another command in another module and you're not allowed to do that, because auto load will mean that I'd have to pick which module I'm going to load. And if both of them were in Windows PowerShell under program files, it would have to pick, and it would pick whichever one it picks, and you get to live with it. So it forbids you by default to install a module that have multiple commands that are in other modules. So the way you get past that is you say, nope, no slapping my hand now. I'm going to tell you that it's okay, or I allow you to clobber. That's their term, not mine, to put a command on the machine that already exists in another module. So that's what this means, allow clobber. And you don't have to do it unless SQL PS is on your machine. So if you've installed SQL and you want the SQL Server module, You do have to do allow clobber or it won't let you do it. Okay. So let's find out if I have a get module. Let's do list available. And I'm going to teach you another advanced thing that some of you already know, I think, but I'll teach you it anyway. You guys can just go, yeah, oh yeah, I already knew that. And that's fine. It's still important. So I do have DBA checks on here. I'm going to go remove it. Okay. Now remember how I said that these guys are self-standing. So I'm going to go out to Program Files, Windows PowerShell. I'm going to go out to Modules. I'm going to go to DBA checks, and I'm going to whack it. So I just deleted my DBA checks module, and now watch this. I'm going to go ask it if it exists, and it's going to say, nope, doesn't exist because I didn't find it. So guess where it goes and looks? It goes and looks in your PS path, your PS module path. So if it doesn't find this DBA checks thing in your module path, it will come back and just say nothing. There's nothing there. Sorry, guys, we're done. Okay, great. So we're done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install this module DBA checks, and hopefully I have not circumvented it. And if I did, I'll show you tomorrow how you uncircumvent it or whatever to make sure you see the error message. But let's just run it and see what the error message comes back, and or if it comes back with an error message, and see if it does. It won't prompt me because I set my PS repository to be trusted. So there's no weirdness here. It's not. It would have prompted me by now to allow it to install, but we said we're good. And now it's going to try to install. It's got to download it. It's got to go find it first in the PowerShell gallery, talking to it, and let's hope that it throws an error. Not that that's what I wanted, but I want you to see the error that happens. I'm not sure if he's resolved it, and hopefully if he has, that would be great. But there is a problem with DBA checks by default because it relies on a module called Pester. If you've ever heard I ran a Pester test, or if you've ever heard somebody learn Pester, it is by default a module that comes with PowerShell 5. And it contains a specific version of Pester that the new version is not signed. And so, or it's signed incorrectly, or there's some issue with the signature. And that's a problem when you go to try to install this particular module. But it does rely on Pester because it's a bunch of Pester tests. That's what it does. And of course, it installed without issue because I said I didn't want it to. But I must have resolved the thing. But here's the command piece that you add to it. If it will give me IntelliSense, if it won't, I'll just cry a little bit. It won't. So I will get the command down here, install -module, it checks, skip. Called skip publisher check. And so it didn't find it up here, but it's basically skip publisher check. And skip publisher check means that in order to install a module or add a module to the PowerShell gallery, it has to be signed. I believe. I'm pretty sure it does. But you have to skip the publisher check because this particular version of Pester, those just do get module list available, Pester. Notice how there's the version 3.4. That's what comes with it. I actually have updated my Pester to 4.9, and that's probably why this skip publisher check wasn't necessary because DBA checks wants to use the new one. And there were some issues. So just know that if you get an error, I'll show you the error tomorrow. I'll make sure I bring up a machine that has the issue so that you can see the error message. But basically, it'll throw an error because the publisher check is screwed and your version's not going to work. And so you have to do some craziness with the skip publisher check. There's even some things you may have to do additionally, but I will have those detailed tomorrow so that you can do it. This one worked on mine and I already had it installed, so I probably already resolved it with this guy and made sure everything worked and did the skip publisher check, and now it's there. I could go and whack this one, but in the sake of time, I'm not going to go whack this one just because it's not, I don't want to whack this one. But that's how you do it. Install module, and there's extra parameters. Allow clobber, you'll see, and you'll also see skip publisher check. There's other ones like force and stuff like that. You really won't find a whole lot of need to use those. I'll just say, if you do an allow clobber and you don't need the allow clobber, it won't matter because it won't need the allow clobber, but you still said go ahead and do it. But it won't hurt anybody to have the allow clobber still on there. So you could do this kind of thing where you want to install all the modules and SQL Server, and SQL PS is on here. Then you will still, the allow clobber will apply to all of them, and it will install all of them. And if it needs an allow clobber, you've already allowed it, so install dash module will just kind of happen. Okay. And this is the list available. What you saw me type is this. So I did the list without the list available, and hopefully this is more of an advanced thing, and I'll show you some of the things that you need to know about it because it can bite you in the butt, and I'll give you a rule that you should probably follow whenever coding in PowerShell, especially if you're going to share the code with anybody or publish it on your website. You shouldn't lead people astray by using shortcuts. But this is a shortcut, and I call it significant characters. So the rule in PowerShell, and this will help you in the advanced side, because if you know your command and you're typing it on the command line, you can save a bucket load of time in typing. So if you're a horrible typist or even a mediocre typist, you can save yourself keystrokes, which is super cool. But get dash module has a parameter called list available, and then takes a name, and it can contain wildcards, as you saw here with DBA check star, SQL star. The list available, the parameters to get dash module, there is no other command that starts with list. So you can shortcut this command by saying dash list DBA tools, and this command will work. And it will actually work. So you'll see all the things. But you didn't type list available. You only type list because PowerShell has a significant character rule. I could go back here and say L. And if there was no other parameter that started with L, dude, I'm done. I'm good. It'll match it to list available, and I move on. So on the command line, now I get that benefit. Now, those of you who've used aliases will understand the principle. If I say get dash alias, you'll see this, and we're gonna find one for get module. I believe it's GM, but I'm gonna make sure. So the alias of GM is get member, so you can't use that. Get module is GMO. Okay. So we're gonna say GMO-L DBA tools. And look at that. I get the same principle, right? So I've shortcutted the whole thing with 3 characters, 1 character, and my name. So just know that in the world of command line, this is a more advanced topic because people don't even know they exist. But there's GCI for get child item. There's GM for get member. There's GWMI for get WMI object. If you're typing them on the command line, dude, just shortcut the crap out of things. And you can even create your own aliases and put them in your profile and do all these things. Notice how I'm setting you up for a lot of profile stuff, because profile is where you have your fun. This is where the advanced side of things come. It's really easy to set a prompt, and I'll show you those. I mean, there's some really easy things that you get from your profile. But what you don't see in a basic profile out online is, how do I set my environment up for success in I don't have to do this again? But it's script. So you create it once and you use it all the time. So that's what we're going to show you. But these are cool. You can do a new dash alias in your profile and set up your own aliases. As long as the alias doesn't exist in this list, these are the default ones you get out of the box, and you cannot duplicate them. So clear would be clear-host. CLC, you see this guy, this little % sign. You've seen that in code. That's for each object. The question mark, where object, that's kind of stinking cool. When you get down here, you see GC for get content. You see GCI for get child item, or dir. Dir is also a alias for the same command. Dir is right here, if I can spell. Dir is get child item as well. CP for copy. So aliases are pretty cool. These you get for free. These are part of the thing. And so if you use them in your scripts, they will work. If you use a custom one that you want, then they won't work unless you put them in your profile. So when the PowerShell thing loads your profile, as long as it's running as you, because it is very personal. You can set up a public one. We're going to show you. But these you get for free, and you can customize yours. I will tell you the rule now. The rule is this: to be a good citizen of PowerShell, even a DBA, because DBAs are, I think, better citizens because we say we are. And I'm a DBA, so that I'm just pulling rank. To be a good citizen in a DBA PowerShell world, or even a PowerShell world, you should never distribute code that has shortcuts in it, especially custom aliases. Now, if you want to distribute a module that has an alias, you shouldn't do this in a module because it can be decently rude, because people will have to find that out by going forensically inside your module and using commands to find out what you put in here. But if they're just you on the command line, knock yourself out. But if I'm going to put it in script, and I'm sharing it, I should always say get dash module list available. Yes, it's a lot of typing. DBA tools. It's a lot of typing. But in your script, you don't want to go back and go, what the crap is GMO, and have to look it up. It's not cool. It's not fair for the people that download your scripts to see it. So the rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Put the full command in, put the full parameter name in so people can read your code and understand what the heck you did, rather than having to unscrew it or just not use it for fear that you're doing something underhanded. So that's the rule. So knock yourself out with aliases, knock yourself out with significant character sets, but just be kind to others and be nice to everybody else, because it's important to not be mean. All right. So next, we already did the get module. Here's what we have. Here's what happens when you are on a machine that has 3.0 or 4.0, and you don't get the luxury of doing 5.0 or 5.1. If you want to take these modules and use them on versions that are lower than 5.1, you can get on a machine that has 5.1 and actually save the module. Name it, the DBA tools, that's what you're pulling down, and you tell it where to put it, the path. So if I went into here and I went to C drive and I saw the path of modules, so let's go to modules and DBA tools. Now, if I didn't want to put this DBA tools and I just wanted it under DBA tools, I could delete this and change this to be modules. Okay. But what this will do is it'll save the module from the PowerShell gallery, name DBA tools, then it'll pull the DBA tools module and put it in this path. So now watch what happens. I go to my path. I come down here and see it's still working. So it's got to download 20 meg or something like that. It's got to connect first and do all its things. Do-do-do-do-do-do, and we wait and wait. So while it's doing this, it's installing the package now, and basically I'll show you what that actually means, because it's pretty cool, what it actually means and how you can do it yourself without a lot of fanfare. But in case you don't want to use save module, say you can't use the save module, we'll show you how to do it without doing save module because it works really slick, actually. Come on, you can do it. So we should be able to see, it's unzipping it now, it's unzipping. So we should see it coming up here, should be in here, come on. Copying unzip package. It unzipped it to the temporary path, and now it stuffed it in here. And look at this, 1137. I have the module right here. It's all here. So now I actually, once it finishes, it's not done yet, but now it's finished and I've got all the module. Now, if I looked at this guy side by side, and I went here and side by side, I went to my folder. We'll put this up here, put this down here, and we'll go side by side to my PC, program files, and my Windows PowerShell, modules. I see that, and I won't have the same version, but for now we'll just look at the latest 114. Look at that, Markdown, all commands, build. They're all in there. They're all in there, and that I got my folders: XML, optional, internal functions, ENUS, bin. I have an extra one, dev container, but that's okay because it's really not used. It's a dot folder, so you don't have to worry about that. But all of a sudden, I've got my stuff in a save module. Now, what I can do is, I don't have 137 in here. See, I only have 114. But what if I want 137 in here? I can copy and paste. And look at this. Doodly doodly, and I'll show you how we can see. It's going to copy and paste it in here. It's Xcopy deployment. Remember that? A beautiful thing. Xcopy deployment used to be a thing. Those of you who are Linux people, it's exactly what you do, right? You put it in a folder and boom, Xcopy deployment gets you that. So now I have 137. If I go back here and say get module, list available, DBA tools, you will see that it now includes 137. I Xcopy deployment that sucker into my realm of PowerShell, and that you can do the same thing. You can actually take this folder, or actually this folder, DBA tools, and copy it into your modules folder on your machine, on the other machine that has access. What if your machine doesn't have access to the internet? Your SQL server might not have access to the internet. You may have to get it from another machine that has it, but you can zip this folder up, come over here, put it in your modules folder on your machine, and you don't have to have internet access to have the module. Beautiful. And if it's a version 3, 4, or 303 version 3 or 4, you can just copy and you don't have to install that module because you can't. It's really slick. Now there's one other way to do this, and not a lot of people know this, but I'm going to show you it just because I like you guys. It's pretty cool. SQL Server. We'll just do DBA tools to show you something we already saw. So DBA tools, I searched here, and here's the DBA tools module. Click on here, and it shows you, hey, guess what you can do? And we go, what is that? And it says you can install dash module. Oh, look at that. Copy, install dash module, and paste. Oh, good. I can, oh, wait, I'd only have 3.0 or 4.0. So I can't really do that. Azure Automation, you can deploy it to Azure Automation right here. So if you're using an Azure instance and you're wanting to do it in your PowerShell console, you can deploy this guy to Azure Automation, and it will put it in your PowerShell thing where you do PowerShell console. You can use DBA tools. Really cool. But this is the one that people don't know about or don't think what I do with this. It's a new PKG file. What the crap is that? So I download the raw NuGet package, see, NU package, NuGet package, and it comes down in an NUPG, has the name of it, DBA Tools 10137. I can go ahead and show me in the folder, and it shows me here. And here's my package. The one thing you need to know is wait for it to scan for viruses, because then it will, once it gets done and says open file, you can go in here. Now I can right click on this. You must do this or else you're in trouble. Same with zips. Anything you download from the internet, unblock it. Click OK. And now watch. If I open this, how do I open a new PKG file? That's not going to work. It doesn't have an icon, so it doesn't have a default program. But watch this. Take this new PKG, rename, take away the new PKG or leave it, and do a zip. Do yes. Now it's a regular zip, so let's open it. Look what's in it. Oh, all my stuff. So I can just take this and unzip it into a folder called DBA Tools /1.0.137. And now it's just like having my module, except I downloaded it from the internet from another machine. I didn't have to do save module. I did download package. I can unzip it to my non-internet friendly machine, and bam, I have the module. Dude, that's super cool. So this is an advanced step for you, but it's every module has this. Download raw NuGet package, and you have it. You're done. You unzip it, and you're good. So pretty cool. Nice help for the people who don't have internet access, or for those who just need that feature. Okay, so that's super cool. And then Xcopy deployment is the key, right? You can take and do that. Now, we'll talk about this Xcopy deployment here in a minute because we won't deploy something else we're going to use this for, but we'll show you another command that actually supports that as well. Now we're going to go into the profile, because the rest here, we're going to go through this in a minute. We already showed you the manual download, rename the package to zip, and unzip the module. So this is all in the documentation here, so don't worry about that. Let's talk about profile. Okay, let's pause for a second. If there's any questions, I've seen some things that are going in on the chat and stuff like that. So any questions that aren't clear, need more answers, or are we just super clear? I know, guys, I'm awesome. Thanks, but I thought you might have a question maybe, but if not, that's super cool. It means you guys are all advanced people, which is great.
I was just going to see for reference if these scripts will be available on your website later.
Yes, they will be under. There's supposed to be a page. I just had my website redone, and I love it a lot. But I'm trying to. I believe it's under training. That there will be a page that actually has, and I'm not sure why it doesn't have it. I will make sure it's up there, and I will reference it in a blog entry. So I'll just add a blog entry that references it, but I will make sure that I put a page under training that actually is where I've been. I used to have it, and now it's gone. So they must have ditched the page. I'll have to get that back. But yes, it will be on my website, and you'll be able to get that, so you're good to go. So all of these will be available, as well as tomorrow there will be a little slide, and Wednesday there will be a little slide. So all of those will be packaged up. The other place to get it, if you don't have that, is the where'd they put it? I will make sure my link here, there's supposed to be a link here to GitHub, but I am DBAduck everywhere. So if you do GitHub /DBAduck, you'll go to my repository, and there is a repository for presentations, and there will be a Iowa or user group, and then there'll be Iowa in here. That will have all of this. For each day, I'll have day 1, day 2, day 3. So once I get them up, they'll be on my GitHub as well. So that might be a faster way to get it than waiting for me to get a blog thingy done. But anyway, that'll be helpful. Any other questions? Great. All right, let's talk about profiles, because this is where the rubber meets the road. We can all type in commands. We can all use modules and commands in modules, and that's really helpful. But this is where you change over from beginner to intermediate or advanced, is by having a really, really robust profile. Now I'll show you mine. I don't have all of this stuff in here because this is a personal machine. So there really isn't a whole lot of need for configuring my corporate environment as far as like my machines that are in my environment, my databases I care about a lot or whatever. But we're going to show you how that works in this guy. But the profile itself is basically $profile is an intrinsic variable that exists in every PowerShell install, and it basically has the path to your personal profile. So there's a Windows PowerShell folder under Documents, not by default. So by default, this folder doesn't exist, Windows PowerShell, and you would have to create it. Then there's a file that doesn't exist either, but it's called Microsoft.PowerShell_profile. This is for the they've now made it such that you can use Azure Data Studio, which we're using, and get the profile in your window. If I were to switch back to here in the integrated console, it is still the same, I believe. I don't think they've changed it. And in fact, it's not letting me do anything. So I think I might have hurt this guy. And I'll just go back. But there have been cases where maybe in code, yeah, whatever. We'll do that. We're going to show you code in a minute, but we're going to do Azure Data Studio. So this profile variable contains your PowerShell profile path. And you'll notice it's the personal one. I'm going to show you where the other ones exist. And they don't have an intrinsic variable. So you may set up your own. You may say public profile equals, and then build it, right? So there's building blocks in your environment. We're going to show you where that is. Dir or get child item of env. env:. Yep.
Hey, Ben, we've got a question. Yes. Yep. Is there a difference between Mac and Windows kind of machine for PowerShell? If you take your profile from your Windows system to your Mac, can you do that, or would you even want to do that?
Yes, you can. You can do that. They're in a different place, so I'll just show you. Since we're dovetailing, I'll just show you PowerShell 7. And again, you guys can't see this yet, but we'll bring it into the window. For some reason, it wants to do it outside my window because it doesn't like me. But here's my PowerShell 7, and it's 7.1.1. If I said profile here, notice how it's the same name. So they were very friendly. So if you on a Mac, you would run PowerShell 6 or 7. You couldn't run Windows PowerShell unless you were in a Windows VM. So you get PowerShell 7 on a Mac, and it still has the same name. It would be in a different folder, obviously, but you would just do $profile to find out where it is. And the other cool thing is if I wanted to open it, I would say Notepad profile in Windows. You can do your own, but profile itself is an intrinsic variable that has your profile in it. So Microsoft.PowerShell_profile.ps1, and I've opened up my profile. So it's kind of pretty slick. We'll go into this in a minute. So yes, on a Mac, it still has the same name, and you would just need to make sure you know where your default files are, and that's where it would put it, your personal one. Now, where else it is? Did that answer your question?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So there's we'll preface this. I don't know how many people use this command get PS drive, but I'm going to show it to you because it is again, it's going to be important tomorrow. Get PS drive. PowerShell represents a lot of things, but what it is really good at is these providers. So you notice the provider right here, and the provider, there's an alias provider, there's an environment provider. The most drastic or the most common ones are file system providers. There's a certificate provider. There's a function provider, and there's a registry provider. So between variables, registries, functions, environments, you're not going to use a ton of these a lot, but registry is a really cool one. There's a drive called HKCU. That's the HKey current user hive in your registry. There's an HKLM that your registry provider provides for HKey local machine. So you can start navigating. Basically, providers are this. Providers are a way for PowerShell to represent that object or that environment as a file system. So even though it says the provider's an environment, it is actually a drive. So you can say dir env : and there's your environment variables. They're all there. So you can get your environment variable of PS module path. There it is. If I want it, instead of doing a dir, I can do a get item. So I can just up arrow. Hopefully all you guys know about the up arrow. But I can get item and get that into a variable and then manipulate it. So dir just does a get child item of my environment PS module path, gives it to me. My get item will actually get the item itself and let me put it in a variable to manipulate it. So these drives, we'll just do get PS drive again to show the new ones. Whoops. And if you don't type it, you get this red message crap. D is a drive letter. We know about that. D : E : environment : function : HKCU : if I did a dir of HKLM : you'd notice that it doesn't like this because it's the SAM. So it'll throw an error saying you're not allowed. And then requested registry access is not allowed for the root. But here's my HK local machine. I have drivers, hardware, SAM I can't get to, software I can. So if I said, everybody that's seen dir HKLM software, or where people say, go into the registry and go into HK local machine software, here's all my stuff. And there's a Microsoft here, right here. So HK local machine, software, Microsoft, blah, 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 blah. Those that just have properties are showing here. Those that have folders and have stuff under the folders will just be a folder list. So I can actually remove registry entries. I can actually update a registry entry, and I can actually do a new registry entry. We won't show you all of that detail till tomorrow, because this is where you get into the crux of the advanced stuff that people don't know or don't care about. But these are for you, because Pat wanted me to do an advanced session. So we're going to give you an advanced session here for PS drives. You'll see where PS drives are going to be really important tomorrow and the next day, because we're going to show you what drive you can add to the PS drives by using a special provider. So it's pretty kind of slick. But the other environment variable, let's just do dir variable. Because the variables are what PowerShell gives you by default in your environment. So again, $ is the HKLM software. Where do we do that? Oh yeah, that's the last command. The question mark is true. We won't really go into these until tomorrow. But these little shortcut variables are available. Most people don't know what they are and don't use them because they don't know what they are. Args, that's a really cool one. There's no args because we didn't do a function, but args will contain that. Here's some other things that you want to know. Maximum alias count, 4096. Here's one that we want, PS home. So PS home is going to be what your where your PowerShell.exe is. Now notice it says Windows System 32, Windows PowerShell v10. So this is important to know. PS home is very important. But guess what PS home also contains? It can contain a profile. And this is the global profile. Now, if you have a global profile and a personal profile, it will load your personal. See, here's your profile. $profiles relates to your personal one. If you have both, it will always load the personal one first, and then it will run the global one. I will warn you, if you have an earlier version of PowerShell, they weren't consistent. It could be that it runs the global one first and then the personal one second. So just be aware that if you have both of them, just either don't duplicate the content or be very aware of how which order it loads in. But this PS Home will be your friend, and we're going to show you why. PS Edition, desktop. What if you're running another edition of like the ISE? It's a different, I believe the ISE is a different edition. We're just gonna tell in a minute. $PS Edition. Desktop. So it's still desktop. It just has a couple other things that it does differently, and I'll show you where that is. What that is. It's a $host. So here's your host. What's this? I mean, it doesn't show me a value. It shows me an object. So anytime you see this kind of thing, it's an object. Your information preference and your error action preference are what you want to care about in the advanced side of this presentation. We're going to show you that tomorrow. But these guys can be manipulated anytime you want to change the behavior of your code. By default, error action preferences continue. That means if you throw an error, it will throw the red on your screen. You'll get blood on your ledger, but it will continue. Now, what are the values of error action preference? You can silently continue so you don't see the red. You can stop and say, just die. I mean, just if you hit an error, I don't want you to come back. But note, look at this guy. The $error. Look at this. Requested registry access is not allowed. Remember, we saw that. We saw that right here. Registry access is not allowed. So it keeps track of the last error in $error. Oh, this will be really cool tomorrow when we start playing with SMO. Be really super cool. But that's what you get when you have an error. So what time do I end? Help me so I don't blow out this day for you guys.
We can go to 8 if you want. I mean, it's up to you.
I mean, we got 3 days, so I just don't want to keep people past where we should keep them in this case. So is the normal time to end 8, or is the normal time to end 7, or what do you normally do?
We've normally ended by 7:30, but we've had people online just kind of chatting like what we did between 5:30 and 6.
Okay.
So 8, and then people log out at 8.
I'll plan on going till 7:30. And then if there's more that you guys want, I'm happy to stay past that, but we'll just plan on 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are your variables, and these do, some of them, notice the debug preference, silently continue. These will affect your behavior. Some of them will. So the error and the error action preference, the debug preference, there are certain things that will affect your behavior of PowerShell. And you may want to change them, you may not want to. But others, this will show you everything that you've done for variables. So if I said $Ben equals Yahoo, if I did a dir of variable now, you will see that Ben shows up as a variable, because the variable drive keeps track of all your variables that you have in the system. Now, another thing that most people don't know is that you can say remove variable. And now if I do dir variable, you'll notice that Ben is not there anymore. It's gone. So you can remove variables from memory and get them out of there so that you can reuse them or not. But that's variable. So that's a drive. We're not going to go into any other drives until tomorrow. But the environment variable drive and the variable drive is super, super powerful to be able to have access to those. And some of the variables can change your behavior of your system. All right. So remember how I told you that profile existed and it contains your personal profile. Now, there is no variable called $public profile or $PS home profile, but you can create one so that you can edit it. So PS home, I hope everybody knows about the double quotes. Double quotes means that you can substitute a variable for its value. If you use single quotes, then you get literally, it's a literal quote, and you get what you see. So in this case, I want PS home to be replaced. And as long as I don't have as long as I don't have an object, this is just a variable, it will replace it. If I have an object, I have to do the $ and then parenthesis and then $ and put it in parentheses so it's evaluated, and then this $ means please replace me. So if I had a PS home dot, file, you would have to do it inside parentheses so that this variable is evaluated and put in your string. In this case, we don't have that, so we're just going to do this. But I wanted to show you that just in case, because we're going to see that a lot in the next couple days. Then I do / because I want to use my profile name, which we know is Microsoft PowerShell, and I don't always remember that in my head, so I want to be able to get to it. So that's where this comes in. A $ and then a parenthesis will let me do something inside the parentheses that gets evaluated and then spit back out into the $ parenthesis to replace. There's the thing called split path, and profile is containing a full path, right? So now I get to do -leaf, and the leaf is just the file name. So now I have PS home / and the file name after the path, and now I have a complete path. So if I do this and put it in my public profile variable, now I say public profile, and now I have C Windows System 32, Windows PowerShell v10 Microsoft PowerShell profile. Now it doesn't exist because by default they don't put one there. Okay, if I did a test path, and watch it will prove me wrong because I've been playing with it and show that it does exist. It says false. So the test path says I don't know about that file, it's not there. So I have two options. One, I can say Notepad, public profile. It will come up and say, hey, the one doesn't exist, do you want to create it? Or I can do a new -item, and I can say path is public profile. And it used to be that you had to do force. If you had a path that didn't exist, it would create the whole entire path for you. Nowadays, I think in 5.1 version today, you can actually say new item and it will just do it. And then I say file. And it will actually create me a file of this public profile name. No, it's item type. Sorry, my bad. Item type of file. And okay. And notice that is denied. Why is it denied? I mean, because my Azure Data Studio is not running as an administrator. This guy's running as administrator, so I should be able to do it here. But how do I get in this, it doesn't obey hopefully you guys know this. If you launched another PowerShell window, brand new, so notice my last command was install pending reboot. If I launch another window, PowerShell 5 actually will keep track. Come on over here, guy. There we go. I can do up arrow, and guess what? So, it does do it. When I launch a new window, it actually picked up my profile that I did here. New item, public profile, item type. So in my new window, it actually picked up my other commands. Check that out. So I can actually do that. And I can actually say new item type file, and it will create it. It's 0 length, but now I can actually say Notepad public profile. And it will open up that window in Notepad, and I can start editing it and save it, and it will save it in that public profile. I won't do it because I won't. But now I can have a public profile as well, and that means that any user, so agent running on this box, if you don't have a personal profile for the proxy that's running this stuff, then it will load the global profile and have all your stuff that you've decided you wanted in there. So it's really pretty slick to have a public profile. I typically will set this if I'm going to use it. I don't really set it in my profile. I'll show you my profile. but I don't really set it. But just know that you can actually build your public profile list. And I'll dovetail here. Notice how there's a Windows PowerShell here, but it doesn't let me run a Windows x86 one. But if I do here and say PowerShell, oh, it won't show you. There is actually one called PowerShell. Oh, it's not showing me. Dang it. There is actually a new one. I'll show you where it is, since it's going to be a pill and not show it to me in Cortana is not going to show it to me is what the real crux of it is. If I go into C, Windows, there is a System 32, which is the 64-bit version of Windows, and there's a SysWow 64. So if you have a driver that you're going to use in PowerShell and it's x86, it's only 32-bit, you go into the SysWow 64. Now you see the irony? 32 is 64-bit, and 64 is a 32-bit. So it's just funny that they named it that way. But there inside the SysWow 64, there is a Windows PowerShell folder, and there's a v10, and there is a PowerShell.exe. So I can run that guy, and now I get a x86 version, and now my PS home is Windows PowerShell under SysWow 64. So I have a profile that can live under here if I'm running the x86 version. And I can have a 64-bit version that has my profile under the System 32 PS home. So just know that you have 3 potential profiles and more if you have utilities that use their own name for their profile file. If they don't use Microsoft.PowerShell_profile and they use, that's why I was going to show you VS Code, and we'll show it to you in a second. Some of the tools that use PowerShell will make their own file for profile, and they'll load it by default so that it doesn't conflict with others. Azure Data Studio and Visual Studio Code has a PowerShell extension. And the PowerShell extension, I believe, is right here. And the PowerShell extension is written by Microsoft, but it has one side effect. And that is that, yes, it does let you run this, and it does give you an integrated console. But there is a bug that is either impossible to fix or hard to fix or something. But there's a bug that when you run, and I'll show you before the end of the night, and remind me if I don't, it basically mangles your transcript, which we'll talk about in a second. So if your transcript, which you should, it actually mangles your transcript and makes it just really hard to read and follow. And it griped me enough that they allowed in the Azure Data Studio and the Visual Studio Code to create a new terminal that is just PowerShell. And you notice that it loaded my profile because this is not the default prompt, but it loads your profile. It's really PowerShell. If I said $host, it really is the console host. If I did this, and I don't think I can because it locked me out, and I think I can trash it and say, yes, I want to restart this one. So PowerShell integrated here, and I'll show you that if I do $host, you'll see that it is not the same. It's a Visual Studio Code host instead of a regular host, console host. So it is different. Runs the same version of PowerShell, but it is its own host, and it mangles your profile or your transcript, which I transcript a lot in my presentations. And tomorrow we'll actually be transcripting everything, and the next day we'll actually be transcripting everything. So by the time we get done, and we'll just talk about transcripting now, everything that you do and everything you saw in this window would go into the transcript, including your command and your command line. All of that goes into the transcript. So when you open up that transcript, you will actually see all of the stuff that you want to see. But notice there's one thing that the integrated console didn't do. Notice it didn't load my profile. Why not? If I do $profile, notice it's a VS Code profile. So it didn't load my native profile like Azure, or like this PowerShell window did. It loaded my native profile. That's why I have a weird profile. There's my date. Here's my time that this prompt was shown. This is the amount of seconds that my last command ran. This is my current path of where I am. And then over here, this is my history number that this command will be. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And once I show you my profile, the history will show that this 37 and this command will be 37. So now if I go get dash history, it will then show me my history, and that number will be my history ID. But I'm all the way, I mean, look at this big long path. Look where I'd be in this window. Look how far I'm in, and I'm typing my first letter at this point of the command. That's terrible. So I'm a line, I'm a long ways in, where this profile or prompt lets me be right back at the beginning, and all I have to worry about is the size of this. Okay, so that's why I put it in my profile to change my prompt. So when I'm typing things, I can see them. And I use this PowerShell window instead of the integrated console because I don't want it to mangle my transcript. So that's pretty slick in that realm. So transcripting. Transcripting is, there's two commands. I mean, it's really not rocket science, and there's really not much you can do with them. Start transcript takes a path, and that's it. You have a full path here. I did it in quotes because I actually add the date. So this is a trick. Get date with the dash F is a shortcut for format, and I can pass in a string. It's basically a .NET date format string. So I do 4 Ys. That's the 4-digit year. The capital MM is month because the small mm is minute. So capital MM is month, and it's a 2-digit month. And then I get day, the small d's, and then I do an underscore. 24-hour HH is double a capital HH. If you want small HH and you want 12 hours, then you can do a small HH, then MM, and then SS. And if I want to do more and do milliseconds, I can actually add milliseconds. And I believe, I keep on forgetting what it is. It's either NNN or FFF. You can look it up, but we can look it up before we go if you really want to know. But I can't remember because I never really use it because I don't start a transcript more than once a second. So I don't really worry about clobbering the name. What will happen? Here's the caveats to this guy. 2 things you need to know about transcripting. 1, when you start transcript, the path, so I do cbin logs and transcript, and you'll notice that in my folder here, I'll just go back to my C drive. Cbin, I usually create a bin. There's no logs folder, okay? Notice there's no logs folder. I specified a logs folder. So you would expect it to fail and say, hey, buddy, you didn't have a logs folder, so you're dumb. You should fix that. But because transcripting is so important, and you'll use it a lot when you do automations because you won't watch the automation, you can't see what it does, but the transcript always watches. And it records everything in the transcript that happens. So even if you're running in an agent, this transcript file will contain all the silly stuff that comes out of outputs, write hosts, all that stuff will go in this transcript. So you can wake up in the morning, open this transcript, and see if you threw any errors. Now, it won't be in red, won't be in yellow, but it will be text. So you can see it. You can search for words. You can do all sorts. So it's just text. So I do my get date, put it in a $ parenthesis so it evaluates first, and then .txt. And what this will do, I'll run it and you'll see it'll come up and say, okay, transcripts has started. Wait, the logs file didn't exist. So how did you do that? Well, it said, dude, I'm not going to let you miss a transcript because you forgot to create the path. It fully creates the path regardless, it's done. You get the path. So it's almost like using a force without having to use the force. So you're a really powerful Jedi and only thought to use the Force, and it still did it. That's pretty cool. Here's the thing the second thing you need to know about transcripting. Transcripting is buffered because it's slower if you don't buffer. So you want to make sure that in your transcripting that you always, that's a lot of always, but always, if that doesn't emphasize it enough, you always want to have a stop transcript, because stopping the transcript will flush the buffer and close the file handle. You'll get really tempted to exit the window and just accept that your transcript is what it is. I've had corruption happen. I did a transcript once on a USB key, and I just exited it without doing a stop transcript, and it actually corrupted the whole file. I didn't get my transcript at all. Not on a USB key, on a normal thing, I've got part of the transcript. It still closed the file, but I only got part of the transcript. Whatever was in the buffer was lost. So if I didn't wait long enough for it to flush the buffer, I would have some lost stuff. So always have a stop transcript, and I'll show you some tricks as to never forget. But I'll also tell you one of the things that you need to know of when you won't ever get a transcript stop, if you click a certain place in the window. So start and stop, huge. I will tell you one other little thing about this that is, again, this is advanced, so we're trying to give you some tools. You actually can nest your start transcripts. I could start another transcript, so I could do this again and exit this guy, and do this guy, and it will actually start another transcript. See, it's a different name, so I'll go back in here and look at that. There's 2 transcripts. Now I will have to do 2 stop transcripts, and as DBAs, we understand this. Think of this like a begin tran. You can have nested transactions, so you need a stop transcript twice to get these things to close. But the benefit is, if there's a critical process inside your big, long automation, and you want to hone in on that particular piece and only open that file when you get done, and leave the bigger one to something else, and you open it maybe later, you can do a start transcript in the middle of your automation with a different file name, and you can then do stop transcript when it's done. So you can do a begin tran and commit, and it's better than begin tran commit because you can't roll it back, right? So we can still roll it back when a nested transaction in SQL. But in this, you actually get the closed file and the flushed buffer for that particular transcript, but the data will go into the main transcript as well. So you get the whole entire picture and the little pieces. So you can nest transcripts. Now, the one last caveat I'll tell you about transcripts. They're wonderful, but here's what you do to yourself when you don't take care to name the transcript properly. If I just said start transcript, path cbin logs transcript.txt, and I did my stuff and I said stop transcript, and then I said start transcript cbin logs transcript.txt, and I ran that, it will clobber your transcript.txt and overwrite it. It does not append. It overwrites it. So just be aware you can shoot yourself in the foot if you're not having a setup like this where you get date and it's a unique name. You can clobber it. So just be really careful to not clobber your transcripts. So we'll close this one transcript just because we only need one. We'll stop transcript here, and it stopped my don't notice that. Stop tells you what one it stopped, and it stopped the 18.4.500. So we now know that that's actually true, and it's still left open my 18.4.238. Okay, so that's kind of cute. The other thing you will need to know is help. So this, I left help to the last because help by default in 3.0 and above, 2.0 and 1, which you should never be using 1. 2.0 actually contains the payload of help. In 3.0 and above, they felt like it was important to limit the payload that was on Windows machines. If you never used PowerShell, You don't have to worry about the payload of the help. And so they left it off. So when you go and you try to use help, get-help, it will actually notice that you haven't updated help, and it will say, hey, you haven't updated help. Do you want to go update it? And if you say yes, it will take a while, and it will go update things, and you might even get an error when it tries to update help on something that doesn't have help, and it will blow an error, but it'll update your help. So if you have a machine, like we talked about modules, where you can save dash module, you can actually save dash help and save it to a destination path in help content. And then you can point, or you can share that folder, and you can update help and point it to the source path of cbin, help content, and it will go across the network and get it, pull it to the machine so that you can use help on that machine. So that's kind of helpful. A pun was kind of intended. All right, so we've got that. We're going to look at the profile now, and then we're going to go through what else I do in my profile. We'll talk about help in just a second as far as some tips and tricks, because you're going to want to use those. So let's find out what my profile has. So let's open up my profile in the real world here, and I don't think I can there, so I'll just open with open file, and I'll go to my profile place. Documents, Windows PowerShell, and my profile. Where to go? Microsoft. There we go. We'll open that guy up. And here's my profile. So we'll scroll this down a little bit so we can see. All right. So I'm going to quickly run through. Notice how I have TLS 1.2 already put in place, just in case it goes crazy. And if I copy this profile, even if I am already on TLS 1.2 because I've battened down the hatches on my machine, it still doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt me at all to have this declaration. So I first say use TLS 1.2 so I can do install modules. I get my date with a get date with a format to get my seconds, and then I start transcript. And notice when I go into here, I already have a transcript started. When I go into documents here, and I go into my Windows PowerShell here, you'll notice that there's lots of transcripts. Whenever I start whenever my profile loads, I get a transcript by default. And so that's nice. And I put it in the Windows PowerShell folder because it's easy. It'll always exist because my profile exists. So I split path profile. If I don't say leaf, I get the path, right? So if I do split path profile, I just get the path here. If I say split profile with leaf, I just get the name. So in here, my profile, I just say split path profile, I get my path, and then I add transcript underscore date.txt, and I get my specific date for the second, and I'm good to go. I register an event. This is a special thing. This is what I was going to tell you about making sure you have a transcript stop in there. But basically, PowerShell.exiting is the event that happens in the window of my PowerShell window here. So when I say exit, it registers. There's an event called PowerShell.exiting, and I register that event in PowerShell and say, what you should do, my action is stop transcript. So I never lose it. If I type exit, I know it's going to stop my transcript and exit, and I'm good to go. And then this is just saying support event, please. So I always do this in my profile just in case I get a little hunky, but here's what it doesn't cover, okay? There's another way I'll show you how I'm doing it, but this is the exit way where you just get in habits of exit. If you have your window like this and you click the X, there is no way, just no way you can capture that event because it's not an event. It's somehow this Windows thing that just, it's going to happen. You don't get to do it. So if you click the X because you're more clicky than typey, then that X will not register that event, and you'll get what you get out of your profile. It might have it all. It might have flushed the buffer. It may not have. So you could die, or you could have half the profile or half this transcript and part of it be gone, or you'll get lucky. So if you want to roll the dice, you can click the X. Otherwise, type exit, and I'll show you another way to do it that isn't so brutal. And then the next thing I do is I test my path for my profile, obviously, and my history.clyxml. Now you're going to see why this matters in a second. So my history.clyxml is basically a command for get history. And you'll see that in my exit function that we'll talk about in a second, I stop the transcript and I get my history, and I do where this is not with where the execution status equals completed, and I export to, guess where? Split path profile, history.clyxml. Looks kind of the same right here, where I test path it and I import it. If the test path comes back false, it doesn't import. It means that I haven't exited a window to where it saved it yet. So it's not going to load it. It's just going to move on. And in my window, you'll see that I'm at 4. But in my Azure Data Studio, I'm at 42. But that's just because I haven't saved the profile yet here, or saved my get history here. So when I launch a new window, it doesn't have the luxury of loading the history, so I'm up 4. That's why it's 4. So let's talk about this really quick. The history is basically a mechanism inside PowerShell that lets you know what you did. So get-history has all my commands. The command line is what it is, and the ID is that number you see, 42. So 42, if I go down here, 42 is not here because 42 was the command I just did, and so it didn't know about it until my command was completed. Then it added that number to the history. So if I did hit get history again, 42 would be here, but 43 wouldn't. Okay, so just know that it's not cheating you. It's just the way it is. So 41 says split path profile leaf, and there it is. Okay. Now what you don't see, this is a view, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. This is a view of your object, and PowerShell governs that by format types. And we're going to talk a lot about that tomorrow, because when we use SMO or when we use DBA tools, you'll see why that really, really, really matters. But get history here shows me this. If I want to get history and see what else there is in there, I do a format list or an FL, see on the command line FL, or I do a big like format list and star. I actually can have the ID, the command line, and the execution status and the start and end execution. So I can get the time it took to run that. So if I'm running commands and I'm taking 10 seconds, I will know that by virtue of this seconds. Now, what this doesn't have is milliseconds. I don't believe that it has it. It might actually have it if I looked at the detail, but right now it just has seconds. So it didn't take more than a second to run this. But what this execution status is, and here's where I'm going to throw you a curveball and maybe suggest that you don't do my filter, and I'll tell you why. My filter says, give me the execution status of completed, which means say you executed something and it errored, and you went, well, why would I want that command? Okay, there's a big reason why you might want to still include that instead of filtering it like this. I might just say get history pipe to export CLI.XML. Most reasons is because number one, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of commands that error because you're a PowerShell veteran, right? You're going to execute commands that will complete. You might get a few errors, but what's a few errors in thousands of successfuls? So here's the reason why you might not filter it like I do here. In your transcript, so if I open up this transcript here, this is the latest one. If I open up this transcript, you'll see that it has lots of information about what's going on. My username, my run as user, blah, 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 blah. And it has these commands, PS home, and it has these things, okay? So notice this, 1 and 2. Now, again, if I'm opening up multiple windows, that's a different story, okay? These are for the windows. But this one is most likely, let's see, where's my first one here when my management student, right here. Here's let's see, we'll be able to tell. Right, let's open up this guy. So this guy has a lot of stuff. Yeah, this is the one for the Azure Data Studio. List available, blah, blah, blah. But notice what we have in here. 4, Now 4 said that my command was PS module path. Let's go look in my Git history. Let's see my Git history here. My 4 was indeed env PS module path. So what does that let me do? If I go back in my transcript and I see that this command was 4, 5, 6, and I want to run this one again, okay? I want to run that command again. There's 2 ways. That's really slick if you have history. If you don't have history, it doesn't matter. But the reason I load my history are twofold. One, if I go into my commands here, and I know that I did PS module path, I can type a # PS module path or PS module and hit tab and tab through the commands that have that string in it, but only if it's in my history. Only if it's in my history. So now I have a way to get back to commands that I love because I have this in them. Now, the other way is we already know that that 4 was the command. I can actually say, get history ID of 4 command line. And there's my command. So I knew it was 4. So I could have it in there. If I have my history all the time, I could actually circumvent needing to have the type on the line. I can go get history ID 4 command line, and I can execute that, or I can put it in a string variable and then invoke expression. I can get the same thing. So now I can go like this and say invoke expression. And here it is. It invoked the expression behind command line, and I have my little guy. So knowing the number in the transcript doesn't have to, you can hate it and not use it, but it can be useful to know that that was 8 and you can go reuse it or pull it into something, or I know I want 8, 11, 12 and blah, and export them into a file to where you know the commands because you saw the command numbers were 13, 14, 15. So that's one reason why you may decide not to enact this, because once you do, the 4, if 3 was an error, the 4 becomes 3. And now you don't have a reference back. So you get to decide that. That's left up to you. But basically, I create a function called exit me, and that stops transcript. It gets history filtered, stuffs it in there, and types exit. Okay, so it's all good. Stop transcript works. I also have me a get miles assemblies because I hate typing this command in every time I want to see what assemblies are loaded. We're going to use this tomorrow. This will be very important for you as a DBA to know what you're doing or what is happening. And then this little fun, weird thing is the last part of my prompt, or the last part of my functions before I go into my prompt. And that is I invoke expression of creating a function. And the reason why you have to is because char4, kudos to anybody who knows what this character is, but char4 is a control D. So just like saving typing or characters on the keystrokes in the command line, this char4 is a control D, and control D you can't do this on the command line and have it work. It'll blow. So if you put it in a string, it substitutes the char4 and then invokes the expression. So now I get this function called control D. So now it will call exit me. Exit me's up here. It stops the transcript, gets the history, and exits my window, all with control D enter. So now I'm like, hey, I've saved a lot of characters. I have this mechanism. I always know control D's there. And so if I do this and I do control D, it stopped the transcript if you didn't see it, and it exited. And now my transcript is closed and all is hunky-dory. Okay, so Super cool. Nice. But guess which transcript it stopped? The one it started. So I don't have to worry ever about it clobbering any other transcript because it's session based. So my control D enter, sweet. Now I've got me an exit me. It does the things I want. If I went in and I ran another window now, because history does exist, if I go into my folder here, I will see a history file right there. And now here's the caveat. When I export CLI.XML right here, it'll overwrite that history file because I want it to. If I don't want it to do it, if I want it to only import the CLI.XML and that I put in there, and I don't want to clobber it, I can put -no clobber. And it will actually error when it tries to export. And I don't want that, so I'm good. When I exit this, I'll have all my full history here in this history.cli.xml. So that's why I do it. So pretty cool way. It will find the test path now, and it will do it. So if I open up a new window, you'll see that my window, is still over there in the other window. I don't know why it does that. It's just very remembering. Notice I'm at 4. And if I type in get-history, you'll see it was the 4 that I used in my last piece. I have 3 in there, and my 4th one was get history. So I have my Notepad public profile, my new item, blah, blah, blah. So I have these now in perpetuity until I overwrite them with my other history. Okay. So you might version your history. You might you knock yourself out. That's what you get to do. I get to show you how it works, and you get to play. So these are my functions I put in for my profile. Could there be more? Yes, and we'll show you that in a moment of how you set up your environment further. This, again, is my personal machine. On my corporate machine, I have a little different story, and we'll show you what that means. And the last one is just a function called prompt. Any of you people who have used DOS, I come from a way I programmed an 8088 IBM personal computer way back in 1984, and it was really slick. Actually, 1985 is when it came out, and it was really fun, but it had DOS. DOS was the baby, and DOS was a very command. It's like your black window, your command prompt. That's what you got. That's what it booted into. It didn't boot into this nice friendly GUI. It was just this box, and inside that box, I could change the prompt by. The common one was prompt $P, $G. And all that meant was that you got the path, so C:\Windows, and you got a caret. The G was greater than sign, so you got a greater than sign in front of your path. And that was a prompt. That was a famous path. And then people changed it with the monikers that you could get. And this prompt, you can change it to whatever you stinking want. So this prompt actually comes up and says host UI raw UI window title, changes to my environment username, my environment computer name, and then my location. So if you look at my window, you will see, okay, you won't see there. You'll see here that it has C, there's my DBAduck at Ben Desk, and my C Windows System 32, and it will automatically, if it's an administrator, I didn't have to put that. Notice it's not in my profile. I didn't say administrator, but it will automatically put that if you are an administrator. Okay, so that's what you get in your window title, because I said when it runs the prompt function, do it. So it did it. My last command is get history -count. So my last command will go in my, and my next ID is this, and that was what will go in the in the brackets is the 4 or the 5 or the 6, because the next command is 5. I've already used 1 through 4. And then the elapsed time, it basically takes the last command, that's pretty slick, and says execution time, and start execution time, just subtracts them, and then do .total seconds. So when I ran this guy, you saw my total seconds was 11.23 seconds to install the module pending reboot. So I get this nice little thing that if I run a command and walk away, I come back and I see my total seconds. And then I form my prompt. Get date format, no new line, foreground color red for my date. This format G is a standard format. I don't have to do Y, and it's the standard format. So you see that in my profile here. This is the G format right here, the 2/8/2021 and then 7 p.m. Okay. And then I do a colon. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I do a colon with no new line, color gray for the things because I don't really want to see them. And then I write host elapsed time with the seconds, no new line, foreground yellow. So you can see my prompt is yellow for the seconds. And against blue, yellow's kind of a mustard color. So it's kind of yellow. And then colon again, and then get location, foreground color green. You can see that. There's my green current directory, right? So it's all nice. Now I could get location, or I could use a variable called $PWD. Those people who are in Linux or FTP from the command line know that PWD stands for print working directory. And that's the same thing as get location, but I just use get location, which is totally good. And then I do and from there on, check for administrator login. And I just basically say if I do add that. So I do that. So I add to my window title plus equals administrator if I am an administrator of the box. So that's kind of cool. And then from there, if I'm not an administrator, I don't do anything. And I then I write my host for next ID with no new line. I don't put in my administrator guy, and I don't do my pound. I do my greater than. So if I'm on a pound, then that tells, oh boy, don't do that. If I do pound here, then that will become part of my prompt. If I do a greater than, then I get the thing. I'm not sure why I have this. I should have this pound because I am an admin, but I'm not sure why it's not doing it. But it does do the administrator thing here, so I'm not sure why this is not my pound sign. But that doesn't matter. And that's my profile. So for now, my personal one is very personal. So we're going to take the last 20 minutes and talk about how you finish off this thing. So we talked about install modules. We talked about using the different tools, Azure Data Studio. Here's Visual Studio Code. It has the same type of extensions. So if I go into extensions here, you can see I have the PowerShell one installed here. If I click on here, it says uninstall. So I know I have it installed. So I can, boy, there's a lot of prompts here, and I'll just do it later. But if I do a new file, here's the thing you have to know, new file, it comes in as untitled one. So it's really not PowerShell until you say save as and do it as a PowerShell file. So it says PowerShell here, untitled. I'm just going to go into cbin and just say untitled for now. And then now I get this, and now it's got the PowerShell little thing. And if I do my view and my console, my terminal will be here. Notice how it ran 7.1. So it ran PWSH. I can select the default shell or configure terminal settings. So I can make this be 5.1 if I want to. This one by default just opens up 7, and that's what you get. But notice it loaded my profile. So Visual Studio Code still allows me to run my profile. And if I do $host, it is console host, not the integrated console like we saw in the other one. So they've really kind of come back on the new Visual Studio Code part. It is not in Azure Data Studio. The provider does this integrated shell. So they haven't quite came up to the same speed as Visual Studio Code, but it is certainly still a viable editor. Does dark really well, but that's one of the options you have is Visual Studio Code to write your code. The reason why I use Azure Data Studio is because it also gives me the ability to do servers. I can write queries. I can do a mix of PowerShell and queries, so it's kind of handy. So tool-wise, you have the options. You could use ISE. I'll just tell you that it's no longer coded, so it's all the bugs have been fixed that they're going to fix, and they really, in a pinch, it's nice because it has a nice little interface, and it is multi-document, so I can have a new window, and the same thing. I can run something in here, something in here, something in here, and it will all show up in one console, kind of like Azure Data Studio, kind of like Visual Studio Code, but in a pinch, you can use it because it's on there. You haven't installed Azure Data Studio, you haven't installed VS Code, but in a pinch, it works great, but there's not a whole lot of features that they've added to it. So that may not be an option for you. And if you do $ profile, it has a different thing. It adds ISE. So it does not use your default profile to load it. Last thing about profiles, you may ask yourself, okay, so what if this is my personal profile and I really don't want to load anything when I launch it? I want to choose whether I code or I pre-prep my environment for my SQL servers. If you understand the principle of dot sourcing, you can certainly take and dot source a file. So you might have corporate connection or SQL connections .ps1, and you can have that code in there. And then inside here, or even not inside here, when you get ready to go do your thing, you could actually put a variable in here that says $SQL connections and the path to your SQL connections .ps1, and you can actually do this is your path, and you can actually do just dot source $SQL connections, and it will dot source this into your environment. And now you do have your connections, but you don't have to put it in your profile to load it, because you might load modules like DBA tools. It takes a few seconds to load. You might not want to wait for that every time you launch PowerShell. But when you're dealing with SQL, you're willing to dot source this guy and or create it in a function and just say function load SQL connections. And then inside here, you just dot source the C, whatever, or path, right? You can do a parameter path, and then dot source the path. Oh, take that out there. There we go. And then you just dot source the path. Now you have a function in your profile that lets you type in load SQL connections, and it just does it, right? You could even default this path to be equal to PS home, whatever. And if you don't want to type in a path and it's always SQL connections.ps1 in your big folder, then you just type in load-SQL connections and enter, and it will dot source that for you rather than loading it every time you want it in your profile. So this is things you think about when you start doing more advanced functions and you don't want to have to worry about typing them in for yourself. So it's kind of slick, but this is one option for you. So let's talk about the last piece of customizing this. So we're gonna actually go back into this guy and show you the options. So let me refer to my notes here because I have quite a few of them that will matter. I will have this all set up for tomorrow, pointing to my machines, but I'm going to teach you a few techniques to save yourself some time, because if you're managing an environment, your environment typically, now I'm going to speak generally. In some cases, and I'll just say most cases because I'm optimistic, normally your numbers of SQL servers don't change. I mean, often they change, but not often. Every day if a new instance came up and you decommissioned another one, then you'd have a little duck and jive, job, which is fine, but it just more work. But typically in environments I've been in, I have a set of SQL servers and I have a way I connect to them. And so if I had these pre-configured in different variations, then from then on, I would be set to manipulate them in the functions I created that would leverage DBA tools, leverage SQL Server, leverage Export Excel, whatever, but I get to govern my environment. So the environment looks like this. I have two SQL servers. One's called SQL 01. So server 1 equals SQL 01. Okay. Server 2 equals SQL 02. Now, I could choose to make my variable name equal 1 and SQL 02. Those are my names of my SQL servers. And it could be that you have an instance. So SQL 01 / instance 1 and SQL 02 with an instance. And this would be passed into any function that wanted a SQL Server name. Okay, so it's kind of nice. The benefit to that is that you start setting up your environment. Now, this is a simplistic example of how you would create your world. Now, in my world, that I have lots of different customers that have lots of different things, and that's fine. I would create one per environment. So I'd get in there and I'd set it up. Once I set it up, not only do I have an environment where I can just use it because I know the names of the machines or the environments, but I also have documentation of what my instances are. Which instances do I manage? I care about that. Now, in normal worlds, we would go into here and we'd create us some registered servers. We'll talk about that tomorrow, how we leverage registered servers or central management servers. Hopefully you use those. Those are kind of slick because you now have a central place where everybody can go and actually get all your instances in your central management server. So that's kind of happy. But in this case, I'm very simplistic in this way. What if you wanted to indicate in your environment, again, this is not saying this is the way you should do it because your environment's going to be different than mine and your mentality is going to be different than mine. But here's an option. Here's the options. And there's probably more if you really wanted them. But here's options that you can have to leverage these guys. One is you can create a custom object. So say you did SQL servers. SQL server equals SQL servers equals a empty array. Okay. In this case, I'll teach you the right way to do this. You don't want this to be all you do. You want to use the system.collections.arraylist. You'll cast, this is casting. So if you haven't done that, this is a little more advanced than just doing a variable, but you're casting this array, empty array, to an array list, which is heavy. Those of you who have been to my sessions know that arrays are immutable. So it deletes the array and recreates a new array when you add an element to an array. This is a .NET data type that lets you use a memory buffer to add things to the array. So now I get the luxury. In my SQL servers, I now have an empty array, and I might say SQL servers.add SQL 01. And a SQL servers.add SQL 02. So now I have a SQL server. So we're just going to execute this guy just for kicks here. And now I'm going to say SQL servers. And I have two instances. Okay. Now what happens if I want more parameters? Say I have a SQL server credential that I use. So I can get a credential with cred equal, we'll just do cred 01 equals get credential. And I'm going to F8 and I'm going to type in SA and my password for the credential. Now the benefit is that's now in a variable. If I say cred 01 and I say there, it says my username is SA, but my password's a secure string. So because I typed it in that dialog, it now is a secure string. No one can get it. So now, unless they're me, right? No one could hijack this guy and get my credential unless they're me because I encrypted it with doing this. So now I have a cred. What if I said, I want my SQL server and I want a cred in the same object so I can have my credential and my SQL server together in my environment. So say I had 4 servers that had SQL Server credentials and 2 servers that did not, had Windows credentials. I could decide to create my custom object in a couple ways. One, I can say object equals hash table. There's an empty hash table. I can say object dot SQL 01 equals SQL 1, and I can say object dot SQL 01 cred equals cred. Okay, so now if I do that, I get me a hash table, and if I say object I now have name and value pairs. My SQL 01, I should have said server. So server equals SQL 01 and cred is equal to this PS credential. So now I can use that object and I can even add it to my list. I can even say SQL servers.add and add a hash table. Now, some people don't like hash tables because they're a little weird and they do have some drawbacks, and we won't talk about them today, but there are some drawbacks to hash tables, like in enumeration and stuff like that. What if you just wanted a plain old PS object? So the easiest way to do that would be object equals double quote pipe to select, and select is a alias to select object. And I'm going to say I want name and credential. No. It does this for you. It does this for you because it thinks it's smarter than you. So you have to hit escape and then do that. And now I can say object dot name equals SQL 01 object dot credential equals cred 01. Now if I run this, and I say what's in my object, I get SQL 01 is my name and credential is my PS credential. Now it's not name and value pairs. It's actually an object that says name and credential. So I only have one object and it has these properties on it instead of name and value pairs. They're nice, but now you have to pull out the name to get the value. So like I said, the hash tables are a little, they're okay. They're just a little bit warty, right? They have a little bit extra work to get things out of them. But this guy can be also added to servers. And now I have my SQL servers. And I can do the same thing. Now the benefit to this is I can test if object.credential. Yes. Else no. If I run this, I can see, okay, it did not like that. If, else no. I don't know why it's not liking me. Else no. I guess it doesn't like me for that. Not sure why. It might be because I didn't test I didn't say is null. But I shouldn't have to. Anyway, it's because I'm demoing and I'm typing. It's not recognizes the name of a commandlet, so it's not being friendly. I must be doing it wrong. I don't know why. That's really weird. But anyway, in my function, I can say if object credential, then I'm going to use the credential. If not, then I'm not going to use the credential. In DBA tools, it's very smart. If you say dash SQL credential and the credential's null, then the function won't use the credential. So now I have one call. I can just type in object credential because in PowerShell, it's a language where it's dynamic. If I said object.ben, I would get nothing, right? Because there's nothing in it. If I said object.credential, then I would get it. So in the DBA tools, it lets you pass in a null to the SQL credential, and it just doesn't use it. It will use Windows authentication. So it's very smart. So now I have a way to put credentials on those that need credentials and leave them off if I don't need credentials, and DBA tools will just work. So I don't have to worry about that. So it's really kind of slick to do that. But this is the point. If you have a set of servers that you want to set up in your environment, I'll have a working example tomorrow to show you the end, but I wanted to show you how it works because setting this up is a one-time deal, or it's a one-time deal with caveats to say that later you might have to change it if you add servers and stuff like that. But in the beginning of what you set up, you actually have the ability to take and set up your environment in variables. You can name them what you want. You can put them in an array list, so you can iterate over them. You can get them from your registered servers, which we'll show you tomorrow. There's all sorts of ways to get your SQL servers into a way where your functions that you write will be able to leverage those. And on Wednesday, we're going to actually show you custom functions that you would write that leverage modules like DBA tools, SQL Server, import Excel, and you marry the two, right? So in a normal world, you're going to import the module DBA tools, and you're going to run the things in DBA tools as functions on the command line. But what if you want to combine them? What if you want to export the credentials and then run the credentials that you just exported on another machine? Well, you'd have to type in multiple commands. But what if you do that regularly to do things? You'd create your own function that would leverage the two commands, put them in the way you want to, and now you have your own function that has SQL Server commands in them, has DBA tools commands in them, and has all that stuff. And as long as the modules are on your machine, now you get to leverage them. That's where this stuff comes in really big handy, is because your functions understand your way you laid these out. It understands that there's a variable called SQL servers, and it contains all of them. And each server has things like credential, has names of the server, has all sorts of stuff that you know how to use, but DBA tools wouldn't know because they had to create it for you to use them command by command. And that's good. That's a good thing, because now you have a module and now you know how to use functions. But now what you get to do is you get to create your own tool. It's a difference between a function and a command in a module and a tool that leverages those guys. And then you graduate to scripts. The scripts will leverage the tools leverage the commands. So now you get this big benefit of marrying the two. You don't have to write the functions for DB tools. You don't have to write the functions for SQL Server or PS Framework, any of them. But you get to combine them in your own tools to take advantage of getting information you care about, and only the things you care about, even though the command might send you back a lot more than you care about. You get to do that. So there's some good things, and tomorrow we'll show you more about the module of DBA tools and why you want to make tools that use DBA tools. All right. So hopefully this was helpful in setup. Tomorrow we'll go through a lot of the night 2 stuff, which will be surrounding. Let me make sure I got the right thing. Night 2 will be all about modules deep dive. So we're going to go in depth into the modules that I've listed, show you some commands, show you why you care, show you some little unknown things that you might not know or might not have heard about using these module commands. But once we deep dive through them, the third night will be all about building your own tools, leveraging them, doing the work. Lots of things that you do on a daily basis can be done in one command with no clicks. Not that we want to supplant SSMS. That's not the goal. In fact, I'm going to show you how to use SSMS more efficiently using PowerShell. So there's lots to learn, and hopefully this was a good beginning to get us where we want to go. We didn't really show you import-export module, or I mean import-export credential, but we will show you because we're going to use it. So I just wanted to introduce you to what they are. Basically, export PS credential takes your credential, stores it into a secure file that's encrypted, and we'll show you what that looks like. And then import PS credential, as long as you're the same user that exported it and you have access to that file, you can import the credential and it will become a PS credential, just like you saw when we created one with Get Credential. So it acts the same way. It is the same exact thing. It just so happens that that file is encrypted, so no one else can get to the credential, even if they wanted to. It would be fully encrypted, and no one could touch the password and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to do starting tomorrow. So if there's any questions, or you want to hang out and ask questions that were off topic or on topic or a different topic, you're welcome to do so. But I will end at 7:30 and honor your night and let you get to where you want to go, unless you want to hang out. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everybody who hanged with us. This is an important first start for the other 2 modules or presentations for our sister user group. So I'd like to thank you again, Ben.
Yep, you bet. Thank you for having me.
And Ben, you're coming to us from Utah, is that correct?
I'm in Utah. Yep.
Okay, very cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
You betcha.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tomorrow will be a lot of fun.
Oh,
yeah. I think this really laid the groundwork and answered some of those questions that I've been kind of digging into since seeing your presentation. So,
yeah. And the other thing I didn't cover today that I'll cover tomorrow, because I forgot, and it's 7:30, is the world of SMO.
Yep.
It has changed a lot. And I mean, so SMO hasn't changed a lot in how you use it, but what you need to do now to get SMO to be visible to you has changed. It's completely changed. So I'll show you how it used to be, and I'll show you how it is now, and you'll probably choose how it is now. But I forgot to cover that, but that is part of what tomorrow is introducing you to SMO and doing a deep dive on the modules. So you won't miss out. It'll be covered tomorrow.
Very cool. Sounds great. And just curious if anyone has any questions, probably a good time to go ahead and bring those now. Otherwise, we'll end our meeting.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't have is a slide for me to show you how to get a hold of me, but I am DBAduck everywhere. So you can contact me on my contact on dbaduck.com. You can, I Facebook DBAduck, I LinkedIn DBAduck, and you can email me at dbaduck@benmiller.net. So if you have any questions or things, a month from now, a year from now, need some mentoring, whatever, you can email me. I'm pretty good with email and Slack and stuff like that. So email, I'm usually good within 24 hours. I'll get back to you, and you're welcome to populate my email box with things that you need, because I've done this for a long time and I have no problem helping. If it saves you from beating your head against the wall for 2 hours, dude, time well spent. So
excellent.
Good to go.
And Ben, are you, I guess, going to be at any of the Data Saturdays, or what's your next event that you're looking at?
Right now, I don't have any in-person things, but I am scouting the Data Saturdays to get on the docket to speak on those. So right now, I'm in the middle of getting my class ready to teach. I do a 3-day PowerShell immersion class to immerse you completely in PowerShell, to take you through writing functions and stuff like that. That I want to start here in the next quarter, just to give people an option. If no one wants the class, fine, but I'm going to offer it because people have asked me. And I used to teach it with SQL Skills, and now they have their agenda all full. So I'm going to take and do it on my own. So it should be really fun. Yeah, I'm just finalizing all the details and then figuring out how I'm going to get it into the masses. So hopefully that will come in the next quarter, and it won't be expensive, but it'll be very accessible to as many people as want it. And it's my fun. I love doing it. So I'm happy to share my knowledge with people. So it'll be fun. So one day I'll be in the Data Saturdays, but I haven't picked one yet to go, and I haven't really got into that realm. I've been really busy with work.
Understandable.
So I will get there. Yep.
Sounds good. Always good to know what you're doing. I guess you always post those on your DBAduck.com.
Yep. DBAduck.com has a training link, and that will show you everywhere I'm going to be. So if you go there right now, the training link shows you I will be here, and then tomorrow and the next day. And so as I add events, they'll just show up there, and you can follow me where I'm going to be, and things will be good.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Well, so I guess that's the end of our program. I know we're on Central Standard Time. We usually go to about 8, so this is a little later for most of us, but I appreciate everyone kind of hanging with us because this was great information. Yep. And you're right, Ben, you laid down that framework that we're going to need for, you introduced those power tools and, highlighted some of those modules and got to look over your shoulder as you showed us your profile and went through it line by line. That was awesome. So I really enjoyed it.
I apologize. When I said I was going to go to 7:30, I was looking at a Mountain Standard Time clock. I apologize. It is 8:30 your time, so I am so sorry.
No, that's okay. And when you went past 7:30, I was thinking, because I was looking at the time on your monitor, on your computer, and I was like, that's right, he's from Utah. He's I answered in Central Standard Time, which I think when we were setting this up, we did have to get that common time zone and what we were talking about. But
that's too funny. I totally did not even equate that. I looked down at my clock and it said 7:30, and I'm like, hey, got to end, and it's 8:30 your time. I totally blew it. So
no, that's okay.
We'll be more on time tomorrow. So
that's a lot of content actually.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. So
because like I said, most of I know the advanced one training that you had at the pre-cons, I mean, it was like wasn't it like 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. That it goes. So it's a full day of training. Yep. Yeah. So breaking up into 3, I'd expect we were going to have a couple hours at least tonight. And just kind of shows you who's the hardcore PowerShell people. We did start with the attendance of 18, so that's the highest we've had since we've been doing this remote. So I appreciate you bringing everyone to the table for this.
So I'm looking forward to tomorrow. It'll be really fun.
Okay.
Yeah, man. And when we were putting things together, we got a lot of feedback from folks, and they were saying, there's no way I can make 3 nights in a row and not for bigger sessions like that. And that was what got me to ask, if you were okay with recording. And it turns out that serves many purposes, and it's actually, working to your advantage too. So it's a great thing.
It is. So it's totally good.
Definitely.
All righty. Well, I'm going to stop the recording then.
Thank you for doing that, Pat. I appreciate it.
And when you get it.